Hey folks, this is Kelani. So one thing that I've been a little bit frustrated with in Legion so far is the power of trinkets, and trinkets don't really seem to be all that balanced. So to give you a really good example, my Convergence of Fates as normal beats out everything else in Nighthold just because of how this trinket works, which makes me wonder if I do happen to get this on Mythic, will I ever replace that in Tomb of Sargeras? I hope the answer is yes, because I don't want to have to hold on to this. I don't want a trinket from the previous raid being my best trinket, because it also kind of entices me to go back to see if I can get a Titan Forged version when the Titan Forge cap is upped. So I actually have another example of this. I have a 910 Bloodthirsty Instinct that's higher than the current Titan Forging when Mythic EN was the relevant content, which means that my Bloodthirsty Instinct is kind of past where it necessarily should have been able to get to, meaning that also beats out everything in Nighthold. So those are my two trinkets, and I can't really replace them, and I'm wondering if I'm going to be able to replace them going into Tomb of Sargeras. So we're going to look at the trinkets available in Tomb of Sargeras and kind of gauge their current power level. So obviously this is still PTR, we are on the 7.2.5 PTR, and all of this is subject to change, but it's nice to see where Blizzard are going with trinkets, because quite a few of these are weird. So we'll go through all of the trinkets available from Tomb of Sargeras, and any with an interesting effect that I can show off or explain, I'll definitely do so. So, Archive of Faith. It's a crit stat stick with an on-use, channel a cleansing matrix into an ally, healing them for about 1 million over 2.6 seconds. Bear in mind that we will be looking at the normal versions, so obviously some of these values will increase for the heroic and mythic ones, so you can see that's 1.3 million health over the 2.6 seconds, but we'll stick to normal for now. And fully completing the channel also grants the ally a shield that prevents about 200k damage for 10 seconds. So that seems like a pretty valuable, I guess, healing cooldown in the form of a trinket. It's on a 1 minute cooldown, so maybe useful for tanks? That's a lot of healing over 2.6 seconds. I'm not too sure about that small shield. 200k, it's a decent amount, but it's not really going to stop anything huge coming a tank's way. So we also have the Barbaric Mindslaver Intellect Trinket. With an equip, your healing effects have a chance to do an additional 90k healing. This occurs more often based on mana exhausted, up to 100% more often at 20% mana remaining, which definitely seems to be a very valuable trinket. I think this might be the one for healers to really go after, especially if they have a lot of effects which are kind of ticking over with little bits of health. So I can see Resto Druids absolutely loving this, because I'm assuming all of their hots ticking will count for that healing effect, so each of those hots ticking will have the chance to do that additional healing. And if you ever go down to 20% mana, you're probably just going to be rolling in free healing from this trinket, so it looks really cool. Chalice of Moonlight, another intellect trinket. Your healing spells have a chance to increase your crit, strike or haste by 4.3k for 10 seconds, and this effect grants crit during the day or haste during the night, which I think is interesting, but ultimately kind of terrible design, because people are going to want one or the other, and I don't really see what the point in creating such a trinket was, but hey, we'll see how it pans out if it even makes it to live. Charm of the Rising Tide, another intellect trinket. While you remain stationary, you gain about 550 haste every 1 second, stacking up to 10 times and lasts 20 seconds. So even if you stand still for the entire duration, you're only going to have 10 seconds of that 5,500 haste, so I'm guessing this is going to be something to kind of preempt and then make really good use of. You could do a lot with that huge boost of haste if you kind of line it up with other things at that 10-second mark, and it is on a 1 minute 30-second cooldown. Cradle of Anguish, haste trinket. You gain 230 strength or agility per second based on your specialization, stacking up to 10 times. If you fall below 80% health, this effect is lost, which is quite different, actually. I mean, you'll probably be absolutely raging at your healers if you ever dip below that 80%, but if you combine this trinket with kind of any form of shield, so something like Pride As, you'd actually get a really good combo there. So this kind of is effectively a haste and strength or agility stat stick. So 2,200 give or take strength or agility, and that 1,100 haste. That's going to be probably the one to go for if you're a strength or agility user with haste as your priority. Very cool. Engine of Eradication. It's a mastery trinket, and your auto attacks have a chance to increase your strength or agility based on your specialization by about 4,000 for 12 seconds, and expel orbs of fell energy. Collecting an orb increases the duration of this effect by 3 seconds. So while I was playing around with this, I noticed that the proc rate was kind of wonky. I got a few back to back, but never close enough to extend the original duration, which, you know, you would expect to see. But I also had times when this didn't proc almost at all, which hopefully is kind of a work in progress, but whenever it did proc, you'd get 12 seconds, and then also 4 orbs would spawn, and they were relatively close to you, so kind of, if you have freedom of movement in whatever encounter you're playing, then assume that this would actually be a proc for 24 seconds instead of just the baseline 12, because there should be no problem getting those 4 orbs. If you ever would have problem getting those orbs, I'd imagine this trinket would lose a lot of value. Next up is Feverish Carapace, which is a tank trinket with agility or strength. Taking damage has a chance to increase your armor by 4,400 and cause you to reflect damage as fire when you're attacked, and it lasts for 10 seconds. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of like a Thorns effect with fire damage and obviously a nice armor boost on top. Infernal Cinders. Now I know this has been changed once already, so I wouldn't be surprised if this got changed again, but it's kind of the same, just the way that it's scaled is different. It's a crit trinket, it's for melee. Your melee attacks have a chance to deal an additional bunch of fire damage, increased by 10% for each ally within 15 yards who also has that trinket. So this used to apply a debuff, and you could basically stack the debuff and you would deal that fire damage, and it would deal more damage dependent on how many debuffs were on the target. So that kind of scaled way out of control way too quickly, and 10% for each ally within 15 yards who uses the trinket seems a little more reasonable. But basically you're going to want to stack your melee with this trinket if it turns out it's a really good trinket, which is going to be interesting or really weird or frustrating, I don't know, but it is from the first boss, so it shouldn't be too difficult to stack it on your melee, and that's the first time we've really seen a trinket that kind of works better when more people have it, and it's nice to see new things. Leviathan's Hunger is a haste trinket on use with a 1 minute 30 second cooldown. Unleash Devouring Darkness upon an enemy, reducing their movement speed by 70% and inflicting a bunch of shadow damage over 8 seconds, and you are also healed for 300% of the damage dealt. Now that doesn't seem like a lot of damage on a 1 minute 30 second cooldown. The movement reduction is great, I guess, except I'm wondering where you're going to actually make use of that in a raid environment. That kind of sounds more like a PvP trinket, and I really am interested to see what uses people will find for that in a raiding environment, because it's a bit of an oddball, that one. Recompiled Guardian module is another tank trinket. Its versatility and taking damage has a chance to heal you for about 230k over 6 seconds, and when this effect expires, you and up to 4 allies within 15 yards gain a shield that prevents about 50k damage for 15 seconds. That's interesting. Depending on how often that procs, I could see that being very valuable, especially if you have quite a lot of melee and you have both your tanks running it. So that could have quite a bit of value there. Yeah, that could be cool. Reliquary of the Damned is a stamina trinket and an on-use which surrounds yourself with Wailing Souls to prevent 50% of damage taken for 10 seconds, up to about 870k total damage. The cooldown is reduced by up to 30 seconds based on the amount of damage absorbed. So I know, unless it's broken, currently on the PTR, the way that this is working is the more damage that it absorbs, the more of that cooldown reduction you get. So if you don't absorb any damage, you don't get anything off your cooldown. But if you break the shield, then, you know, you get 30 seconds off. Sea Star of the Deep Mother is a versatility healing trinket. Your multi-target healing spell has a chance to grant you Ocean's Embrace, healing your nearest injured ally for about 15k every 0.25 seconds for 10 seconds, which is a very, very quickly ticking hot, which might be useful, I guess. It only heals one ally, so we'll see kind of how that pans out. That might be one of the useless healing trinkets, which would be sad to see. Shifting Cosmic Sliver. It's a mastery trinket. Equip taking damage has a chance to grant you Cunning of the Deceiver, stacking up to 10 times. Expend your Cunning to reduce the cooldown of a strong defensive ability by 10 seconds per stack, or if you already have one active, it extends the duration of it by 1 second per stack. So if you save these up, you could potentially take 100 seconds off your big cooldown, or you could make your big cooldown last 10 seconds longer. I'm wondering which one you would choose and whether that's going to depend on the encounter. I'm assuming it would, and that's really cool. Giving you that choice of when to use those stacks is definitely something which I would like to see more of. Spectre of Betrayal. It's an agility or strength trinket, and you create a dread reflection at your location for 1 minute and cause each of your dread reflections to unleash a torrent of magic that deals shadow damage over 3 seconds, split evenly among nearby enemies. So while playing with this, it didn't really seem to work. The dread reflections didn't seem to persist in the world, so I couldn't see where they were, except they did do the damage. So I'm assuming that's broken and is going to be fixed by live, and if this actually goes through to live. But that's a pretty cool trinket. I mean, if you keep it on the 45-second cooldown, that means after the first use, you would always have 2 dread reflections up, causing that shadow damage from 2 different locations. So if you were able to stand still, or I guess plan ahead of where your dread reflections are going to be, or where your enemy is going to be in 45 seconds, then you're guaranteed to always be hitting with 2 throughout the fight, except that very first one. Spectral Thurible. It's a versatility trinket. Your ranged attacks and spells have a chance to conjure a Spear of Anguish. After 3 seconds, the spear launches towards its target, dealing a bunch of shadow damage actually to all enemies it passes through, which is basically a piercing shot from a marksman hunter, but in a trinket, which is cool to see. I guess if we have things stacked up or lined up, I can see how positioning could kind of change the value of this trinket, which is exciting. Tarnished Sentinel Medallion. It's a master trinket with an on-use, 2-minute cooldown. Call upon a spectral owl to attack your target, inflicting 80k arcane damage every 0.9 seconds for 20 seconds. Bit weird, but your ranged attacks and spells against the same enemy have a chance to make the owl perform an additional attack for 103k damage. Now, while I was playing with this, the owl just kind of floated near you and didn't really seem to do anything, so I'm assuming that's going to change. But this also might be one of the powerful trinkets. If that proc for the 103k damage has a decent proc rate, I can see that adding a whole bunch of damage to priority targets and giving you quite a bit of burst. Terror from Below is a crit trinket. Your ranged attacks and spells have a chance to summon a behemoth from the deep to swallow your target whole, dealing about 500k nature damage split amongst you and all nearby enemies. And that's not a typo. This is kind of interesting. So your ranged attacks and spells have a chance, you'll see a kind of water effect and then a shark just pop up near whatever you're attacking. If you happen to be next to what you're attacking and the shark comes up, it will hurt you as well. It will split that 500k between you and your target. So not only does it do damage to you, but you'll actually lose value on the damage of the trinket because you just split it between you and the target. So not only are you giving the healers a problem, you're actually reducing your own DPS. So if you run this trinket, or if it's ever kind of worthwhile running, I'm going to assume you're going to try and stay away from the melee as much as possible. The Deceiver's Grand Design is another mastery trinket. With an on-use, mark a friendly player with Guiding Hand, healing them for about 20k every 2.6 seconds for 2 minutes. If they fall below 35% health, Guiding Hand is consumed to grant them a shield that prevents 550k damage for 15 seconds. It's on a 2-minute recharge with 2 charges and a 1-second cooldown. So that's probably one of the most interesting healing trinkets we've seen for a while, and it provides tanks with not really a cheat death, because I don't really think it's going to save them from something which would just absolutely annihilate them, but it gives them a little bit more of a pad when they're getting low health. You know, I can see this being very valuable on any fights where the tanks are spiking a lot. Tome of Unraveled Sanity is an agility or intellect trinket with an on-use. Deal 400k shadow damage over 12 seconds. When this effect ends or the target dies, you gain 2.7k crit for 12 seconds, plus any time remaining on the effect with a 1-minute cooldown. So I guess this depends on what's better for you, the crit or the actual damage, but the less damage you deal with the on-use, the longer you get the 2.7k crit for. So that's a really weird balancing act, and is kind of going to be frustrating maybe if one is significantly better than the other. But I guess if you're on a single target fight, it doesn't really matter. So I'm wondering if this will also only be a good trinket on fights where you can repeatedly kill things with it. Again, it's going to depend on that shadow damage versus the duration of the crit buff. Umbral Moonglaves is a versatility trinket with an on-use. Conjure a storm of glaives at your location, dealing 107k arcane damage every 1 second to nearby enemies. After 8 seconds, the glaives shatter, causing another 234,000 arcane damage to enemies in the area. 1 minute, 30-second cooldown. So that seems to be kind of throw it down for huge AoE burst, and that's about it, with a versatility stat on top of it. We'll see if there's any fights that really require that much burst. If you have a lot of people with this trinket, I can see all of them popping it at the same time to completely wipe out a wave of enemies. Maybe that's going to be valuable? I don't know. We'll have to see with that one. And our last trinket is Vial of Ceaseless Toxins. It's an agility or strength trinket with an on-use, 1 minute cooldown, inflict 160k shadow damage to an enemy in melee range. So I guess that's going to kind of have the same limitations as the Draft of Souls, plus 600k damage over 20 seconds. If they die while this effect is active, the cooldown of this ability is reduced by 45 seconds, meaning that this trinket will be the most valuable if you can kill a target at 19 seconds. If you manage to do that, you can just completely reset that on use, which probably isn't going to happen all that often. And again, it kind of comes back to, if you can repeatedly kill targets in a fight, this is going to be absolutely broken. But on a single target fight, I don't see much use for it with its little bonus effects. You know, they're just not going to happen if you're on a single target fight. So that's probably going to be very hit or very miss. But that's all of the trinkets currently available for Tomb of Sargeras on the 7.2.5 PTR patch. So you can see there's a lot there. We've got a whole bunch of trinkets coming in Tomb of Sargeras, and I'm hoping that a few of these are going to be powerful enough so that we won't have to go into Nighthold, we won't have to even go back into Emerald Nightmare and try and hunt down these trinkets for insane Titan Forge procs. That's my hope. I don't want to be dragging my Convergence of Fates through every raid from here to next expansion. But that's it for this video. If you have any questions or queries, please leave them in the comment section below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Or hop on over to Discord. We have a server at discord.gg/Kelani. Great place to come ask questions or just hang out. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.